Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today, Bel'Veth has been out for a couple of weeks, so I feel like it's about time that we go through and deliver the ways in which you can counter Bel'Veth. Now, Bel'Veth has actually received a couple of nerfs, which honestly is completely shocking to me. I don't feel like that character is very well designed, though I guess that's completely divorced from balance, so who's to say what I know? And definitely this is the kind of character that can very easily swing back and forth from extremely powerful and definitely a very powerful pub stomper into completely unplayable, and you're never going to have to worry about her. Similarly to Master Yi, the sort of other on-hit jungler that is currently in the metagame. So either way, if Bel'Veth does end up in the former situation, I hope this video is going to give you guys some help. Now I'll talk generally about how to counter Bel'Veth in terms of her ability usage especially, and then we'll go into some more obvious counter picks and things like that later in the video. Now, Bel'Veth's kit is entirely based around auto-attacking. That is essentially her primary way of actually getting damage through against enemy champions, which means that anything that you have that can limit auto-attacks or otherwise prevent her from being able to do as much damage with auto-attacks is going to be a big deal. Now, yes, she does have a bunch of true damage that she gets off of her ultimate passive, but it is not actually percent health true damage, it is all flat true damage. And what this means is that Bel'Veth actually can be countered by stacking health, which isn't something that actually we've been able to do for quite some time with all the percent max health true damage abilities in the game like Vayne Silverbolt or Fiora's Vitals, but Bel'Veth is all flat true damage, which means that if you buy a Warmog's armor, it's actually going to insulate you fairly decently from the amount of damage that she's able to do, and of course regular armor is going to do a good enough job of somewhat reducing Bel'Veth's damage by the same token. Additionally, items like Frozen Heart are a good idea into Bel'Veth because reducing her attack speed even a little bit is going to reduce her overall DPS, because outside of a very small amount of damage on her Q and a little bit of damage off of her W, there's really not that much she's going to be able to damage you with. Bel'Veth's most important cooldown is her E, the Royal Maelstrom. Now, the biggest reason this is the important cooldown for Bel'Veth is because even though it's a second max, she gets the full 70% damage reduction from rank 1, on top of it giving her increased lifesteal. This is a really big deal because it means that Bel'Veth is really hard to burst down. If she has access to that cooldown, she's able to get herself into trouble, pop the ability, and then just heal a bunch while taking very, very limited amounts of damage, and allows her to really stay alive for quite some time in the middle of a fight. As a result, if Bel'Veth hasn't used her E yet, you want to make sure you're saving at least one hard crowd control ability to disrupt it, or alternatively, if you're on your own, make sure to run away from her the second she presses the ability. Ideally, you're going to be able to get out of range before she realizes and can stop the channel, and by that point, hopefully, you've been able to open up some space and decide and get away from her. But you have to decide if you're going to fight her and try to kill her through her E, or if you're going to try and run away, because there's really no way you're going to be able to out-DPS Bel'Veth or kill her over the duration of that cooldown. Bel'Veth's Q, important to note, has the four directions, and you can sort of dash in any direction you want as long as you have all 4 arrows up. But the second Bel'Veth has used one dash, her other dashes are all a lot more restrictive. There's like a 45 to 90 degree arc or so in which they're actually able to use the dash, and it really limits Bel'Veth's mobility. So even though she has a lot of dashes, she can't necessarily use all of them the way she wants to. What this means is that if you're running away from Bel'Veth, run away from her in the direction of one of her already used arrows, because then she has to decide whether or not she wants to use a dash that will take her maybe slightly closer, but maybe also open the gap a little bit more because it dashes her to the side as opposed to directly after you, or if she's just going to let you go or keep chasing after you and hope that her Q comes back off cooldown. The cooldown does decrease with her attack speed, but especially in the early phases of the game, it has a decent cooldown and you will be able to escape from her with no problem. Important to note about the Q as well, it cannot go through walls unless Bel'Veth is in her true form. What this means is that if you do ambush Bel'Veth in her jungle in the early phases of the game, she does not have a way to run away from you besides flash. Like, she literally can't do anything other than fight or die, and in Bel'Veth's case, because she's a scaling champion, that is going to be a die more often than not. Bel'Veth's W, there's not really much to talk about here. The important thing is that her W refreshes the arrow in the direction of any champions she hits with her W, so she can do something like Q, W, and then Q again if she hits a champion. What this means is that not only will that be the way in which Bel'Veth tries to open ganks by dashing into range for a W and then dashing again to close the gap, it means that if you're able to dodge the W, not only has Bel'Veth used her dash, but also she does not have that dash back now in order to keep chasing you, and she's with her W, and at that point she just kind of has to go back into the jungle in shame for a failed gank. So definitely a way you guys can think about dealing with her if she does show up in lane. But as I said before, Bel'Veth is a scaling pick. She's very weak early game, and so she's not going to be the kind of champion you're going to need to worry about having that much of an early game presence. Most of what she's going to want to be doing is farming, which is something that you can exploit. If you're playing good early game junglers, or just junglers that clear faster than her, you can invade her jungle to either steal away her camps or just kill her, and both of these things are going to prevent Bel'Veth from having much of an effect in the game. The other thing you can do is just gank better than Bel'Veth. If you're playing a good ganking champion like Vi or Xin Zhao, not to get ahead of myself a little bit here, but those two champions, you can choose to say, Bel'Veth, all you're going to do is farm all game long, and I don't care about that. I'm going to gank, and I'm going to have so much of an impact on the game that even though you're farming, your lanes are going to be so far behind that you will never get the opportunity to actually shine. You're going to just be farming, and then the game will end before you're able to reach your power spikes. That's totally a valid strategy to take with this champion. Bel'Veth's ultimate, there's not that much to worry about. It's basically just a stat stick, as I've kind of already alluded to. The cooldown, or the true damage stacks, do reset if she hits a separate target from the one that she's been stacking on. So if you have a team composition with two frontliners, if you start taking a bunch of damage from Bel'Veth, back away, and if you're able to open a gap, or if Bel'Veth happens to have to click another champion, well, you're going to be in a good spot, because then she has to start stacking on that champion instead, and all of your stacks go away, which means her damage against you is going to drop off quite dramatically. Bel'Veth does have a small amount of true damage that she applies when she actually consumes a Void Coral, but there are a couple of restrictions around this. First, she only gets Void Coral by killing epic jungle monsters or champions, and this means that Bel'Veth then can't just press this button to get a bunch of stats like Master Yi can with his ultimate ability. Bel'Veth has to try and get the first kill before she can actually enter her true form, and once she's there, she can only stay there for 3 minutes maximum in very limited circumstances. So there are definitely a lot of ways to prevent Bel'Veth from ever having access to these extremely powerful stats. One of the other situations is, even though Bel'Veth does have a big burst of true damage in the middle of a fight, she is not untargetable during that animation, and this includes the little roar she has at the very end. That's also not cancelable. Like, Bel'Veth is very immobilized while she's going for a Void Coral consumption, and very exposed. Unlike Viego, right, where when he goes to possess a soul, he becomes untargetable and heals himself. Bel'Veth gets a heal, but then she's fully targetable for the entirety of that animation. So if you don't care about the true damage, right, if you're full health, or at least half health, and you kind of don't care about taking a little bit of extra damage, and especially if Bel'Veth is already low, you can just kill her in the middle of her Void Coral consumption, and it doesn't matter, right? Like, she's totally targetable, so you can just kind of say, sure, we'll just kill you and prevent you from resetting at all, which is totally an optimal strategy you can use. One of the important things to note, though, is Bel'Veth's true form bonuses if she has a void, or a super Void Coral consumed, right, which she only gets off of Rift Herald and Baron. The biggest difference there is that Bel'Veth can keep her true form for 3 minutes, which means that her duration of threat is going to be a lot higher, and it also means that she starts spawning Voidlings when she kills nearby minions. Now, this is a big deal, because if a Bel'Veth with a Baron who is given even half a lane to push and kill a couple minion waves will stack up an absolutely massive wave of minions that can and will shred through towers, and which will be exceedingly difficult to clear. In this situation, it can be very important to try to stop Bel'Veth before she's able to stack up that many minions, because if you don't, she's going to have too big of a wave for you guys to actually deal with, or for any one champion to deal with, and that can give her team a lot of ability to put pressure on the map. If you kill Bel'Veth, though, her true form falls off, and she loses any associated bonuses. So definitely, if you can, just kill her, and then she loses the Baron buff, and then she doesn't have the ability to keep pushing like that in the future after she respawns. It's definitely a strategy that you can look to opt into in the case that Bel'Veth does get her true form. But generally speaking, she doesn't get it for very long, and you can still kill her if she's trying to get it in the middle of a team fight, so it's not that big of a deal. As far as counterpicks go, I sort of alluded to this already, but strong early game junglers, you can decide if you want to either gank better than Bel'Veth, clear better than Bel'Veth, or kill Bel'Veth, are sort of your main strategies, and most of the junglers that are going to do that better than her will be able to do any combination of those three. If you're playing a champion like Vi or Xin Zhao, who have good gap closers and are able to gank very strongly, you can elect to just say, I'm just going to gank better than you. If you're playing a champion like Shaco or Nocturne, you can invade her and just kill her in her jungle. There's really nothing Bel'Veth can do in the early phases of the game. As I said, she doesn't have any mobility, so even if you're Shaco and you like teleport on top of her with your Deceive, you don't have to worry about using your mobility, because she has no real way of getting away from you after that point, especially if she's using her Q to farm the camps. If you're playing a champion like Udyr or Shyvana, you can clear faster than Bel'Veth and then go into her jungle and clear her camps. As I already kind of said, Bel'Veth is weak in the early game, which means that she can't even fight Udyr. So if she sees Udyr on her Raptor camp, that's Udyr's Raptor camp, right? Like, there's nothing Bel'Veth can do to stop Udyr at that point, because if she gets too close, Udyr can and will just kill her. And if you deny her camps, the important thing is not only are you denying Bel'Veth gold, but you're also denying Bel'Veth the lavender stack she gets off of her passive. She gets those off of large jungle monsters and lane minions, the cannon minions specifically. So if you're able to steal away even just her large jungle monsters, it's going to really prevent Bel'Veth from having that late game scaling fantasy that she really wants to opt into. As I mentioned before, anything that deals with Bel'Veth's attack speed is going to dramatically cut her damage, and that means that champions like Malphite or Nasus are going to really be able to shut down Bel'Veth and what she wants to do, which is, in this situation, just auto-attack people to death. Nasus Wither applies something like a 90% attack speed slow. Bel'Veth is going to do no damage at all if she's withered for like 5 seconds. Malphite has a similar situation there with Ground Slam. He can really cut down her attack speed and prevent her from being able to stack up damage on him until it's too late. Burst Mages, I think, are a bad choice into Bel'Veth, champions like Veigar or Lux, because of Bel'Veth being able to gain 70% DR at the snap of her fingers. So instead, I would try to opt into champions that are going to slowly burn her down, things like Cassiopeia or Ryze, because good DPS, Bel'Veth kind of has no answer for that, and especially when these ranged mages are hitting her, she can't hit them back. Her ability to hit things outside of melee range is very, very limited, and she doesn't have much of an ability to deal with a champion that's just going to train her down from a distance. As a result of this, most AD carries are very good into her as well. I would try to avoid something like a melee AD carry. I think Yasuo, for example, would be a bad idea. But generally speaking, if you're playing an AD carry, keep her at range, and there's not a whole lot Bel'Veth will be able to do because she tends to be a very squishy champion overall. For supports, any combination of lockdown supports are good choices to prevent her from going into Royal Maelstrom, or just to have the crowd control to disrupt that if she does press the button, and then give your team the ability to finish her off. This, of course, means champions like Nautilus or Alistar. Anyways, that is going to be it for me today, guys. I hope this video was informational and insightful for you, but if you have any other tips for dealing with Bel'Veth, go ahead and leave those down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.